Testing Airflow. Working on Airflow, and the biggest pain in it is running the unit test itself. So I'm sure some of you will be aware, the tests on Travis take about 30 to 40 minutes each. And there's 6, 8 different jobs, Kubernetes, and so 2 Kubernetes ones, 3 on Python 3 and 3 on Python 2. I don't run them all locally. It brings my laptop to a crawl, and running it sequentially would probably take about 3 hours, by which time Travis will have run it. Except today and yesterday, when Travis had about a 4 to 6 hour backlog in our builds. But anyway, normally it takes a long time. So what I do, I currently don't use Docker for development because I never got around to setting it up. I know that Jarek, who I believe is on the call, has been working on a project he calls Airflow Breeze, which is it looks really nice. I just haven't had a time to actually look at it yet. So I'm going to describe how I work and how I run the tests. John, this is primarily about developing on Airflow itself. I can get into a bit of how I develop DAGs on Airflow towards the end if there's time, but primarily this one's going to be developing Airflow itself, so not how you build DAGs. Right, so okay, so let's start by looking at the Travis config. Here we go. Yes, if you're more interested in the developing DAG side, this may not be for you. I won't be offended if you if people drop out. That's okay. So this is Travis on master as it currently stands. Most of what it does is inside Docker Compose, and it runs this script. My basic workflow is I run commands manually. I pick and choose various different commands from in here. I don't use tox either. I just run the test directly. So this is sort of what we do. And tox any. There we go. Comes to another script. Sorry, I'm chasing it down because this is frequently what I do. Here we go. This is the one. So currently, because I haven't got around to fixing it, let me show a cursor guide. That might help. So you can see where I'm looking. If you run the tests, if you just run this in tests, nose, tests, hooks, test, HTTP hook. You can just do this. And for some tests, this will work. Depends on exactly on how the test is written. One of the problems we've got with our Airflow tests currently, I don't have the depths installed. Come back to that. One of the problems we have with the tests in Airflow currently is that they are not idempotent. Many of the tests rely on the state from the previous test having run first. So you might find that if you try to run a test in isolation, it fails. Which is annoying, and we're slowly fixing them, but we haven't got there yet. So the other thing, so first things first. This error down there. Requests mock. So in setup, devel CI. There's a group called devel CI. Wow, something's going on my computer. Vel CI, which has all these development dependencies, including things that depend on Java, MySQL, and Postgres, and Oracle. So I don't install them all. What I do is I'll install the ones that actually hit. Request mock, knows, mock, request mocks, knows, and then whatever else I need to test the current one. So yes, oopsie daisy. Sorry about that, wrong key. This is the short version of how I run tests. There we go, this one passed. If we go to a slower one, such as the user-facing tests, the web front-end tests, they are one, a bit slower, and two, don't always work. So we need to run the CI scripts do a lot of setup that you have to do before you can first run the tests. I've done this in my environment, but I will try and duplicate what is needed. I'll stop this, it's not interesting. First thing, you need a database. So, there we go, there's a database. That is what I have to have Postgres running locally. Let me change it to tests. Yeah, there we go. Postgres tests. Then I can, so Tox will set this line for us. So we need to set it ourselves. If you don't set that, you'll probably get the default, which will be SQL Alchemy. That will work fine, but I find Postgres a little bit faster, so I do that. Then we need to do Airflow reset DB. This will create an empty database. The next thing we need to do is Airflow core unit test mode equals true. Unit test mode tells Airflow to load some unit test config and behave a little bit differently in various places. Things like get rid of some sleeps so that some of the scheduler job tests run faster, things like that. So we can do that. The other thing we have, which again, not needed all the time, but for some tests we'll find it, the Airflow config file will be CI Airflow Travis. This is something I want to fix. This Travis config file should just be the test config file. We shouldn't have a separate one for Travis. But right now you need to set that, otherwise some of the tests won't have the config that they expect and will fail. I will try and summarize all this into an email or a blog post to go with it, so you don't have to watch the talk to get everything I've covered here. So that's should be everything we need. So we can then go back to knows. Whoops. And the other thing we do is red nose, so red nose does like coloring based on the status, and that should be prints each test as it goes along. So yes, trying to think what else there is that is stuck in my head that I just do that I don't realize I do. Problems you might run into when trying to run tests. There we go, got some errors. That will, if I stop it, should tell me what's going on. So what sort of thing? This is the sort of error that indicates that one of these tests depend on the state of another test. If you get like DAG not found or an objects isn't found, that normally means that something was expected to be in the database and didn't get put there by another test. Tracking down which one it is a little bit difficult. And that one actually looks like an error in master, but we'll ignore that for now. I do configuration. Oh yes, other useful tricks. If you just want to run a single test, you can take one of these test IDs, which is basically module.class. You then have to separate the class from the package. So I know the file is called test_configuration.py, so that's the end of the package, and then conf test is the class within inside that. So we can do that, and that will run just this. And then you can also then do a single test case within that. That is not. There we go. So package : class dot function name. There we go. That's the basics of what I do. Other things I have been experimenting with is, instead of using nose, which is not maintained anymore and not really used, is starting to use PyTest. It has a slightly different syntax for reasons. One of the advantages of PyTest is it's a little bit more maintained. I'm thinking about switching Airflow to use it. There we go. Why do I use that over nose? No real reason. I just prefer it, but it's personal preference and either work. At this point, does anyone have any questions? You need to raise your hand and you can unmute yourself or put it in chat. The packages I install, yes. So I take it's a trimmed down version of what is in setup for this devel list. It's probably that, actually, to be honest. So I would do pip install -e dot devel. So it's the devel group. What I don't install is the devel all, which has all these extra other ones which have a load of depth that I just like. I don't have MySQL on my laptop, so having to install the MySQL client libraries just to run tests is really annoying. So I don't do that. I will do that devel group and then occasionally add in an extra one or two dependencies if I need to run that specific test. Devel CI is devel all. which is, yes, quite a lot. Yes, I depend on Postgres, but that's because I just happen to have it already installed. You can run the tests quite happily against MySQL. Against SQLite, which is a core dependency of Airflow. So you will have it installed, or you should have it installed. And yes, you can use SQLite quite fine for most tests locally. If you're developing an operator or a hook, SQLite is just fine. There we go. Turns out I don't use Devel because Devel depends on MySQL. So I take the list from the Devel group and just pick and choose the ones I need because I'm too lazy to install MySQL. The other thing that is tricksy but possible is the Kubernetes tests. So if you are trying to develop Kubernetes itself, sorry, not Kubernetes itself, if you're trying to develop Airflow's Kubernetes capabilities, then you need a Kubernetes cluster for half of it. So the way I've got that working is script CI Kubernetes. Deploy.sh. There are some scripts in here. I don't use Minikube. So on Travis, we use Minikube to run a Kubernetes cluster. I use Docker Compose. Docker Desktop, Docker for Mac has a built-in Kubernetes cluster. I use that. And I run a combination of scripts. There are two things we need to do. Let me just check which one's which. Yeah, so this one. First off, you will need to get the Airflow image you want to test. So that is this Docker build, Kubernetes Docker build script does. So I run that. I'm not going to run it because it takes a while, but I do Python version equals 3. Do that. I also tend to do that, which is comment out the remove node modules line because I don't want to have to reinstall npm every time. This calls compile.sh, which via this line, compile assets, will end up compiling all the static assets, do the webpack, and build a static CSS and JS. You need that for this to actually run. Without it, your Kubernetes test will fail. So once you need to have run this build.sh command, basically like this. Once it's done that, the other thing I do, let me just start my Kubernetes cluster. It is good. Oh, that's not. Okay. I run deploy.sh. What this will do is deploy Airflow into that Kubernetes cluster. To run it, you need to set nothing by default. So I think I can just do that. If my Kubernetes cluster is running, which it is, it's starting. It's running, right. Sorry, just seeing a question, David. Beyond unit testing, do you test against the running application when it makes sense? And if so, how do you run Airflow still locally? Yes. So let's say I want to put a breakpoint in the web server, because that's often what it is. there are two ways I do it. So let's let us go to a test file. Tests config. No. Tests. Live coding. Don't ever do live coding, folks. So let's say I wanted to test this file here, this test here. What I will do is that. So if you're not familiar, that was a snippet I had in my editor to expand it. So IPDB or PDB is the Python debugger. Settrace is it's a breakpoint. I believe in Python 3.7 you can actually do just say debugger or something like that. But this is in my editor, it's less for me to remember. So if I want to run that, test airflow home override. If I just run that, it's going to fail on me. My laptop is currently consuming all of its available CPU. There we go. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. That's going to fail because nose is capturing standard out. So it won't work. That will fail. Jesus. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop my Kubernetes cluster. It's eating my CPU. My laptop isn't really quite powerful enough to do this. So anyway, to put debug in a test, I use that that line, that statement, IPDB. You can just use PDB, but IPDB gives you tab completion and things like that and colors, so it's a bit nicer. You then have to run nose tests with -s, which says to disable capturing. That's how I debug tests. If I want to, let's say I'm working on the web front end and I need to see why something's not actually working. What I will do I will run a command that looks like I can't remember the interval. There's a airflow home, airflow to config. That, I already set it. Airflow web server worker refresh. K1-D. K1 says run one worker. I find for development that makes things a bit easier. Just kind of, you know, it's always going to hit the same one and you don't end up with multiple requests going at the same time, particularly if you're trying to debug it. -D puts Unicorn and Flask into a debug mode such that if you get an error, you end up with a stack trace in the web browser, and you also can actually start doing a terminal there to look at things and just kind of see what's going on. Using this, you can also put breakpoints with the same IPDB set trace statement anywhere in the code, and it will continue. It will give you a warning about SQLite, but don't worry about that. SQLite, multi-process, threads, something. You can ignore that, it works fine. If my laptop would recover, I could show you. Let me try and kill something. While I sort my laptop out, does anyone else have any questions or anything you would like me to cover that I haven't? Roberto, DAG level access control. Check out the master branch. There's already some things in there. I'm not sure if you can tie that into LDAP groups yet, but check out the master branch and check out the app, the docs for Flask app builder. Go from there. If you have any questions, ask in Slack or on the mailing list. Python 3.7. Yeah, so that's sort of my rough flow, which is I will run some small set of unit tests locally. I then push it up to Travis, wait and see what fails, and then run those ones locally once I know what fails. I can't run all these steps myself. It just takes too long to do the entire test suite locally. Felipe, they are not currently written down. I will write these down tomorrow and send around a blog post along with this video. Yes. Cliff Notes version again. Don't run most of the scripts under script CI. They will reset your database every time, which will take longer. Definitely don't run the whole test suite, just run the ones you're interested in. Make sure you have the environment variables set. Some of them are set by tox, so they aren't going to, even if you just run the scripts, you have to remember to look in the tox setting to pick up the right ones. There we go, that was the Python process I needed to kill. Right. So if I do edit app, let me just show you this. Airflow www views util decorators has access. That's not going to help me. The homepage. Do I use the git pre-commit hook? No, because it takes too long. It takes too long. I could possibly run the in the Travis build. We have a set of pre-tests, which is up here. All these. So we've got run Flake, run MyPy, which is Python 3 static type checking. It works in Python 2, but yeah, it's Python type checking. Joshua Karp has been doing a whole load of work to add type checking into Airflow so that we can detect some static type errors. Checking the license, I don't run myself locally because we add new files so rarely. And this one is check there are no syntax error in the docs. I don't run that one manually unless I'm working on the docs, and then just run it one-off, kind of run the docs, which is, you know, as and when. So no, I've thought about adding Flake 8 in particular into a pre-commit hook because I have made a couple of mistakes sometimes, but it is what it is. Home. There we go. Right, so actually let me show you two things. So if I do raise, what have I just done? Raise runtime error Airflow. I need to create a user, Airflow, because I've reset my database. Will the type annotation be required for the current development? Yes. Not everywhere, not universally. From a few days ago, we check types. So if you get a type error, you'll need to add it from tests. Sometimes it can work it out from infer it, but sometimes if it can't, you'll need to add a type annotation. Cool. One time, I'm not answering questions now. One time I ran into an issue with the Unicorn worker refreshing that I believe was due to my Docker setup. What type of environment do you have in Travis? So yes, Travis uses Docker Compose. There is a script ci docker compose.yaml file. This is what Travis uses. It runs Docker Compose, brings up all this stuff, which has all the dependencies we need, including Kerberos, which I don't know how to set up. So if you need to test something with Kerberos, that's a good thing to look at. Then this Airflow testing is where all the tests are run. It depends upon everything. Oftentimes I will, if I am going to use this, I will do something like that, because I don't want Kerberos and this and that and the other. I'll just pick one of them. Yes, if I'm going to use the Docker container, I will keep that around for a day or so, rather than spinning up and down, because it takes a while, and often I want to install a few extra modules and stuff. Because this line here, in fact, this mounting the app, it mounts the code in from the checkout, so you can just run the code that way. Let me just create a user, and I can show you what I mean about debug in the web server. Users-c admin at first name, last name. Don't steal my password, anyone. It's super secure. That happens. I could do a pip reinstall, but that works just as well. Probably that. Cool. There you go. That one will work, I promise. That is fine. That looks like an error, but it's not. It's just the import error from the DAGs, which gets ignored. I've already got a database. Perfect. So if I now do Airflow web server -d-k1, and I've already got the interval set in my config file. Maybe. I'll set it anyway. Airflow web server worker refresh interval equal, I believe this is in seconds, so I just set a huge value that I'm never going to hit in my testing here. Come on, Ash. Learn from your own mistakes. Never going to happen. -k is not the right thing I want. -w, there we go. Just open up a browser and share it. There we go. Hopefully you can now see my browser. Cool. Right, if I now log in. So when you run in debug mode, which is the -d, lowercase d, option to Airflow, you get this mode, which is quite nice because if you click here, this little, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse cursor, but the little terminal icon on the right-hand side, you get a prompt like this. The code will come from the console. I know you can't see it, but that's all right. There we go. That's randomly generated each time. And then I can see, there we go. I do self. No tab complete in this, but you can explore around self.template folder. There we go, things like that. So that's one way of debugging. The other way is IPDB, just run Airflow workload normally. Yes, I'm a big fan of debugger. I know everyone isn't, and logs works as well, but I find that some things are just quicker for me with the debugger. Cool. Anything else? Anyone have any questions or anything you would like me to show in more detail? I think we've got another 20 minutes or so. At most 20 minutes, I'm not going to keep anyone. Would this debugger work from DAG execution or only from web UI code? This would only work from this one here that I'm showing right now on screen. Only works for the web code. If I go back to the code. For testing DAGs, let's say you want to test an operator. Tests DAGs. Let's just get a quick one. Here we go, test example bash operator. No, Python operator. Let's get something that has Python in it. Test DAGs. This one. So again, similar trick, IPDB. You can obviously put, if you're writing a custom operator, say, you can do the same thing, put it in a DAG, and then what I do is the Airflow test command. So that needs a DAG ID, test DAG run states fail, a task ID, test DAG run fail, and then a date, an execution date, 09/03/27. It's about today. The test subcommand, yes, let me. The test subcommand will not record. You can run these on your production cluster if you want. Can I? There we go. Sorry, my laptop is struggling with this. I can't paste it at the moment. I'll do that in a minute before I finish the session. You can run the test subcommand on your cluster. What it will do, it won't record task states or anything like that. It will still update XCOM, and it will apparently still update the task fail. So yes, we are now. Oh yeah, but you know, tests will ignore any of the states if it's failed or run already or whatever. It will still do that. So be careful running it on your production clusters, but you can do. As long as you know what it's going to do, what side effects it will have. So here, So yes, brief crash course on the debugger while we're here for those not familiar with it. So this is where we are. We set trace and it's on the next line. It's about to run this line here, but it hasn't yet run it. The other thing you can do, since we are here, we don't have any context, but what we can do is we can walk up the stack by going up, and we can then look at self. Self is now the task itself. Thought that would be the instance, is the task. So we can look at self.opargs. If we go up again, up a few more times, there we go. We can look at the context. If you want to look at the context is, among other things, everything that is available to a template. So anything on any keys on the left-hand side. So for instance, if we had a template of yesterday DS, this string is the value we would get. Yes. So there's that. You can then obviously look at everything. You're in the middle of the session here. This is how, if I'm writing a custom operator for a DAG or something, this is where I do it. Yeah. Let me try pasting that command now. No, chat's still not working for me. Other useful tips, just general tips while I'm here. If you're having a problem with a DAG not showing up where you expect it to, if you run the list DAGs with the -R option, that gives you a report. So we just show you the output. I'm going to make it bigger. On the left, you've got file name. On the far right, you have the DAG names found within it. Time taken, number of DAGs, number of tasks, list of DAGs, and then above it, from here all the way up to here, give or take, you have any import errors. So if you have a DAG that's not showing up, check for import errors. That's often what it is. I believe without the -R, you don't get as much information. You still get the errors, but it's useful to see the extra number of DAGs, number of tasks, and which DAGs is picking up in a file, something like that. Cool. I think that is everything I have at the moment. Airflow, test, ready, task. Hopefully this was of some use and not too rambling. If you have any questions, email me, grab me on Slack, Twitter, whatever. I can try and help you out. Hopefully over time we'll get the tests better, but that's where we are right now. We're going to try and make them less depend upon each other. And the web server command, yeah, let me get that up here. Oh, and I guess the other thing I hinted at but didn't mention was how I install Airflow when I'm developing locally, just so that my changes get picked up when I run Airflow, which is basically that command, pip install -e dot. When you run that from the root of the checkout, pip will effectively install a symlink into your Python path, so that any of the Airflow modules come from this current checkout where you are. You can switch between branches and it all works. When switching between branches, this is mostly applies to me and as I'm kind of cherry picking stuff back onto the 110 branch. But if you switch between branches, be careful about database migrations. The easiest way about it is probably to have a different database for each branch if you ever need to deal with that kind of case. Otherwise, it will get confused that it can't find migration files. Yeah, the web UI debugger is built into Flask. It's really cool. It's useful. Cool. Any docs on the web debugger? No, not that I know of. 1Airflow-D. It is one at that point you can basically see a stack trace. You can expand it, and you can get a shell at each point to inspect the variables that are in scope. So it's just like a little mini Python interpreter at that point. When switching branches, you can't run upgrade DB. No. If you're switching to an older branch, so if you have a migration over here, and you switch to a branch that's over here, when you try to run the migrations, it complains like, this ID in the database can't be found. I don't know what to do. So you'd have to downgrade to this from here, which involves working out what that is, and it's just not worth the time. I find just keeping a second database is easier, particularly as Airflow has an upgrade DB, but it doesn't have a downgrade DB command. The underlying bit of software we're using, which is called Alembic, has the ability to downgrade, but we haven't exposed it, and we drive it in a slightly funny way so that you can't just run the command line tool. All right, then. Unless anyone else has any questions, that's it. And yes, I'll get a recording of this one up pretty quickly because it's done for me. And then I will attempt to, one, write this up, and two, probably create some Jira tickets of things that we should fix that have been stuck in my head and I haven't actually ever told anyone. Go figure. Cool. Right. Thank you very much.